they were shown you some indicators and their status, as well as also probably their speech. They were discussed about whether the member states, member nations are on track to achieve the sustainable development goal on the targeted date or the year, that is 2030, or whether they are off the track, and also if they are on the track, say what is the distance they are passed, or at what distance now they are standing to reach that particular target of a particular goal, or if they are deviated from the track, or they are far away from that particular goal. So how much distance is they need to say achieve. So probably these are the things that are on track, off the track, achievements, progress, and these are the say things probably they were discussed also in literature related to assessing the achievements of the sustainable development goals. The many researchers have analyzed. So therefore, it is necessary to know how do we say that a particular indicator, a particular target, or a particular goal is progressing or deteriorating or regressing or nearer to the target set by the nations. So to answer for all these questions, we should have to have some knowledge related to the measurement or the methods of calculation of either the scores or the trend, current status level, and so on. Because without having knowledge related to how a score is calculated, a distance is calculated, or a current status is calculated, so probably we are not able to analyze meaningfully the achievements or the progress of sustainable development goals. So because of this reason, I thought of to speak on the methodological aspects or the methods to estimate or to measure or to assess the trend, achievements, or the progress of sustainable development goals. Therefore, my speech is related to the methodology developed by the various institutions under the UN for assessing the progress and the achievements of the SSGs. So just I will briefly discuss on those aspects of measuring the current status of the indicator, current status of the target level, then the current status of the goals. And in taking or measuring that current status, so the primary criterion is comparing the current value of the indicator or a target value with the baseline year, probably that is 2015. So in comparing the current value of that particular indicators, because we have 169 targets, so different countries have different indicators or the levels of indicators, numbers of indicators of that 17 goals. So therefore, in measuring the current status of a particular indicator or a particular target, so the criterion is to compare the current value or a score or a proportion or whatever the method which has been used to measure that particular indicator is compared with the baseline. And whereas for trend progress or the trend related method, so say there in most of the works, and also that is suggested by the expert committee of UN for that methodological aspects of this trend of the trend progress of these indicators are the targets. They have used compound annual growth rate that has been based on geometric method of computation or estimation. So, and whereas for the goal level, it is a summary of the values of the scores or any other such numerical representations were used or summarized, or they were taken some of the values divided by the total number of the indicators. That is nothing but the arithmetic mean for to achieve a score for the goals or the current status of the goal, and whereas for the trend of the goals. So this is just a brief introduction related to the purpose of this topic, or the purpose of say having a knowledge related to this methodology or the methods we need to know about to assess the progress or the achievements of sustainable development goals. Okay. So we have seen this progress chart published with every Sustainable Development Report by UN. So the first part of this, as earlier I have told you, that based on some grouping classifications, there are different classifications that has been followed for the goals, for the targets, for the indicators, and so on. So whereas this is a progress chart, this progress chart that say classifies all the targets as the targets which are on track, the targets which are on moderately or severely off track, or the other classification is the stagnation or regression. If you just observe that say diagram which is in the top part of this slide, so only 15% of the targets, that is out of 169 targets, only 15% of targets are on track, or they are nearer to achieve the targets by the nations. This is for the whole world, for all the countries as a summary. And nearly 50% out of that 169 targets, they are moderate or severely off track. So it might be because this is calculated based on 2023 or the latest data available to the UN on those various that is the targets. So therefore, out of that, 50% of the targets are severely off track. Probably the reason might be that the COVID pandemic related impact on all these targets, and also the geopolitical crisis which have been seen from the last few years, starting from Ukraine-US war and Israel-related geopolitical reasons, and the recent the Trump's related geopolitical conflicts. So probably these are also reasons along with that COVID-19 so are for severe off track of the most of the targets specified by the UN. And if you take the stagnation or the regression, almost 40%, that is exactly 37% of say the targets are either stagnated or some of them are say regressing. So this is probably the thing which all of us knew related to say measuring or analyzing the progress of the targets in every year, say using that the reports published by the United Nations. And if you get into the progress assessment of the goal-wise, so there are also some classifications like on track or target met, fair progress, but acceleration is needed, stagnation or regression. And also you have seen one more classification here is that, so due to because of insufficiency in the data, so we are not able to calculate or to measure, so whether that goal that goal is achieved or not, or its status or the progress of the goal. So like this, if you open the United Nations Sustainable Development related URL or web, there you will see the various such data charts that showing many things related to the progress or the status of the countries, regions, indicator wise, target wise, goal wise. So therefore, how uh, this assessment is done, the progress of the goals, indicators, or the targets are assessed by the UN is the part of our discussion as earlier I have mentioned. So let me get into the actual part of our discussion, that is the methods to assess the progress or the achievements of sustainable development goals. As all of us knew that 2030 Global Indicator Framework provides a set of intersectoral, comprehensive, and internationally comparable measurement tools aimed at assessing countries' performance and progress towards the achievement of sustainable development goals. Because, so as all of us knew that the indicators which have been used for that targets or to the goals are not uniform, not identical. So, and also the sectors are different. And also it is need to compare all those measurements, all those the information that has been collected related to those goals and the targets should be internationally comparable. So for the purpose of the assessing the country's performance and progress, as all of us knew that. So therefore, the methodology was proposed by the two researchers named Gennari and Orodio in 2020. So based on that, so these indicators, measurements were developed by UN. as almost 1 decade passed since the implementation of this Sustainable Development Goal agenda, with the 2030 deadline around the corner, assessment of whether the established targets will be achieved at the global, regional, national level is becoming increasingly crucial, because as all of us knew that also said, so it is very important to say discuss on the assessment of these sustainable development goals across the regions and the nations as well as at the global level. So this progress assessment methodology at the individual SDG indicator level was proposed by the Generi and others, as earlier I have mentioned. So this methodology at the indicator level distinguishes the two measurement objectives. So if you look the reports related to the indicators and the targets, so all those targets and the indicators are represented with the current status and the trend or the progress. So therefore, so the methodology for assessment of the progress as well as the achievements of the sustainable development goals and indicators and so on, so broadly classified into the assessment of the current status and the assessment of the trend. So the assessment of the current status consists monitoring the level of achievement of an SDG target at a given point in time as described by the latest available data of the relevant indicators. So that means, so if it is 2025, then the 2025 is the current year, and for that current status, the indicators and the targets are assessed. So whereas in case of the trend assessment, that is a measure of whether the target can be achieved by 2030, considering the progress observed since the baseline to the date. So this is a trend that assesses the whether, based on the current level of the progress, a country and within a country, whether a particular target is achieved by that particular country in 2030 or not. So based on that, the trend assessment is used, and of course it was developed. Then, as we know that if you get into the indicators used to represent the say the indicators, so those indicators are classified into the two categories, that is indicators with numerical yardstick, and there are some benchmark for some indicators, and there are some indicators which have no benchmark or numerical measurement or yardstick. So that is, some are quantitative in nature or numerical in nature. Some indicators are qualitative or they are not represented in numerical form. So therefore, so in measurement of an indicator to assess the progress or the status, so since we have several indicators, because some countries, for example, in case of Indian context, so Niti Aayog proposed 308 indicators for these 17 sustainable development goals, whereas UN earlier that was suggested 208 indicators. So all those indicators are broadly classified into quantitative or numerical indicators, and the others are the qualitative indicators, are the indicators which have no benchmark or numerical yardstick. So in case of say numerical yardstick, also we have two sub classifications. So the one is some indicators within these numerical yardstick represent the absolute threshold value, whereas some are relative in nature. Okay, for example, like ending hunger by 2030 translate from a theoretical point of view into having the prevalences of undernourishment and food insecurity that is equal to 0 in 2030 for all the countries and all the regions. So that's why this indicator is a numerical one. It has a numerical yardstick and absolute in nature, and which is applicable for all the countries and all the nations. So therefore, within this numerical yardstick related indicators, we have absolute indicators, or the threshold is represented with an absolute value. Whereas the second subcategory of this numerical yardstick can also be a relative one, meaning that it can differ from one country to the other country or from one region to the other region. For example, that is the target of doubling the farmers' income or farmers' productivity by the end of the monitoring period, that is 2030. The target value of the indicator is in a given country will have to be twice its baseline value, because here the farmer's income or the farmer's productivity that change from country to country. Therefore, though it is having a numerical asterisk, but it is relative in nature and it changes from country to country. So hence, each country will have a different ideal target value to reach by 2030 that will be relative to their own baseline value. So therefore, the methodology which is used to assess at the indicator level, the indicators are broadly classified as numeric, the indicators having numerical asterisk and the indicators have not having this numerical asterisk. Within the indicators which are having numerical asterisk, so the some are absolute in nature, some are relative. So when we come to the indicators without a numerical asterisk, due to the nature of their targets, no numerical benchmark is set to be reached by 2030. Instead of that, only the normative direction of that indicator is fixed, and that has to be followed is specified by the methodology. So like whether that the normative directions are, so whether that particular indicator is decreasing or increasing or non-decreasing, non-increasing. So therefore, so the second part of the indicators and the assessment of those indicators is a normative one based on their direction of increasing, decreasing, non-decreasing or non-increasing in nature. For indicators with targets defined by a state of maintenance or preservation, such as for example SDG target 2.5, maintain the genetic diversity in food production, or the target 15.4, that is ensure the conservation of the mountain ecosystem, the normative direction will be either be not decreasing or not increasing, signalizing that the state of stagnation can be considered as a positive outcome. Because in these cases, so it is a normative one. The genetic genetic diversity has to be maintained as it is. Then, so even the mountain ecosystem should be conserved as it is. So that's why it is not decreasing, not increasing. So hence it is a normative indicator. It is a non-numerical indicator and used normative analysis for these types of indicators. So this is about the classification of the methods to assess the progress or the status of the indicators based on numerical asterisk and based on the indicators not having numerical asterisk. So with this method, so now let us consider or extend our discussion related to the current status assessment at the indicator level. As earlier in my introductory part, as I have said that, so there are two assessments. The one is the assessment of the current status at indicator level, at a target level, even at the goal level. The second one is the trend. Okay, the second assessment is the trend of the indicator, the trend of the target. So it is, this part of discussion is related to the current status, related to the indicator level. So now, based on our previous discussion, this is current status assessment of a numerical indicators for the numerical target. So for indicators with this category, assessing the current status consists in measuring how close the latest available indicator value is to the ideal value to be reached by 2030. So since there is an yardstick, numerical yardstick is available for these indicators, and the target is also numerical one. So then the current or the latest available value of the indicator is compared with the yardstick value, and the process of analysis is how close the latest available value of the indicator to the ideal value. So if the latest value of the indicator is very, very close to the ideal value, or the value that has to be achieved in 2030, so then the indicator which is very close to the say set value or the ideal value, and in that indicators that the status is that is met, or even it is very high to the ideal value. So in these cases, the current value is assessed by measuring the normalized difference between the indicator value for a given area or a country, or that is a region, I in year t, that is represented as xit, that is the x is the indicator, the I is the say area, that is the country or the region, and the t is the year to its target value in the same area, that is x star. So that's why now we have two values. The one is xit, that represent the value of that numerical indicator related to the target for a particular country or a region at a time period t, that has to be compared with the same area or same country that is represented by xt. So now we have a distance. So the distance is between xit and x star. So this distance is measured by using a distance function, and that has been normalized, because so though these are all say the same indicator value, but that has to be normalized, because that has to be comparable across the countries, across the regions. So therefore the methodology uses a normalized distance functions to obtain distance values that range between 0 to 1. So by using this distance method or distance methodology, so finally we will get a range of value. That range is between 0 to 1 for all the numerical indicators which have numerical targets, which increases comparability of the results. As earlier I have told you, indicators having different functional forms, because also some of the values of the indicators might be in count form, some are in proportions form, some are in ratios, some are in scores or total values. So these are the different numerical values an indicator is represented. So then, so we need to comprehensively compare all these counts, proportions, and so on. Therefore, the distance is normalized using that normalization method. So this is indicator with numerical target. So the simply, so we should have to measure the distance between the actual or the latest value of the indicator which we have chosen and comparing with the ideal value. Now we have a distance between these two, and that distance is measured by using a distance function. The distance is normalized to increase the comparability of the results across the nations as well as across the different numerical values of the numerical indicators. And this is a function, a distance function, the distance function. So this distance function, based on this or using this distance function, the distance is calculated as earlier I have told you that. So and there are of course some things are there. If already the distance is between 0 to 1, if there are some indicators which are representing 0 value or the values between 0 and 1, so like proportions, if those for those proportions directly we can calculate the distance function. So that's why in calculating the absolute numerical targets related distance function, these two formulas have been used by the report to analyze and to calculate the status of a numerical indicator of a numerical target. So let us take one example related to that, and of course based on that, so the assessment category of the report is classified like this. That is, these are the legend, symbols, and the labels used to assess the current status categories for the indicators which are representing numerical values. So like 3 plus, 2 plus, 1 plus, minus, 2 minus. Okay, so the assessment category is if we have seen a 3 plus for a particular numerical indicator for the current status, then target is already met. And the general outcome which is used for analysis purposes, it is very positive, because already say that particular indicator met the targeted value. So hence the country's progress, country's status, or the country's achievement related to that particular indicator is very positive. But if it is closer to the target, then represented by 2 plus, and it is positive. And if it is only single plus we have as an indication or a symbol or a notation, then there is a moderate distance to reach the target and it is neutral. But if it is negative and a sign of 2 negative signs, so that represent negative and very negative. So that means far from the target and very far from the target. So that's therefore, so in the reports, we might have been observed these types of tables, and based on the symbols given related to the current status calculated based on the distance functions. So we need to know what they mean and how we need to interpret. So these are the things which we should have to learn for assessment of the current status of the indicators with a numerical yardstick. And that is related to the assessment of the indicator level, as indicator level assessment with the numerical targets. But the indicators without a numerical target. So for assessing the targets, but the indicators are without numerical targets. Without a fixed numerical yardstick in the target, the distance cannot be proposed, because in the earlier, so since the value is numerical, easily we can calculate the distance, and that distance is generalized or say normalized into 0 to 1. But whereas in this case, which is not possible, so therefore for analytical purpose, the the UN report, so that summarizes, okay, the current distribution of these indicators by using the quintiles. So therefore, the quintiles method has been used. All the countries are distributed among the quintiles. So there are 5 quintiles, as of course many of us knew that. So the countries are distributed among all these 5 quintiles. For example, the first quintile contains the bottom fifth of the countries on the indicator scale. Okay, so that is first 20% of the countries with the lowest value. The second quintile that represents the second fifth component of that quintiles, that is 20 to 40%, and so on. For example, the last quintile, that is the fifth quintile, represent the top 20% countries with the highest values. So therefore, all these 193 countries are put in within these 5 quintiles based on the values, indicator scale, based on the indicator scale. And the assessment for that, of course, is given here as 2 things, one for a country and region, and the other one for a global level. So again, this assessment is only for current status. Earlier also, it is for numerical indicators, for the numerical targets. That is for numerical targets with the numerical indicators. So this is for indicators without the numerical targets. Okay, and for current status assessment. For example, here at the country and the regional level, for indicators with increasing or non-decreasing normative direction, because as already we have noted that, so increasing, decreasing, non-decreasing, non-increasing classifications of the normative analysis earlier we have noted. So based on that, here the quintile values are the values scores of that quintiles are classified like this. This is the first part is related to increasing or non-decreasing. For example, that is the top quintile, that is from 80 to 100%. So the countries with have this 80 to 90% related to that particular indicator, or a country or a region itself is considered as a best performer of that particular indicator, particular target. And if it is from 60 to 80, that is the second from the highest, above median for farmer, above median for farmer. So if it is between 40 to 60, the middle quintile, that represent the median for farmers. So if it is between 20 to 40, that is known as below median for farmer. But if the value of that quintile of a country is less than 20 or less than 20, so that is an indication of worst for farmer, worst for farmer. So therefore, if the indicators are non-numerical, there is no numerical asterisk for them, then the current status is assessed for the indicators which are expecting to be increasing or non-decreasing. So this is the assessment based on the quintile analysis. But if the indicators are with decreasing or non-increasing normative direction, then the analysis is opposite to the above, because so there should not, they are decreasing, or the value of that indicator should not increase. So that's why if the value is below 20% and a country comes under that particular quintile, so then it is called as the best performer, and between 20 to 40, above median for farmer, 40 to 60, median for farmer. So if it is 60 to 80, below median for farmers, and say the last quintile, the worst for farmers. So this is related to the assessment of the current status of the countries or the regions of the world with the indicators without the numerical asterisk of increasing or decreasing, and as well as non-increasing and non-decreasing and non-increasing respectively. But whereas for the global level, so the way it is to be interpreted is different, though the values are similar to that region or country level, So here best instead of best performer at the global level. So if for that increasing or non-decreasing type of indicator, it is called as not applicable, because so they are already the best performers. So at the global level, they are met or reached. In that sense, it is not applicable, and the remaining are same, and which is also not applicable in the last case. So this is related to current status assessment of the indicators which are not having numerical, say, yardstick related to their respective targets. So this is the first part of our discussion related to how the current status of the indicators, current status of a target is assessed by the UN based on that distance function for the numerical yardstick related indicators, whereas based on quintiles related to non-numerical indicators. So the another part of the discussion, or the next part of our discussion, is related to the progress assessment, trend assessment, and the methodology for that trend assessment. As earlier we have noted in our introductory part, so in all these analysis, examination of the achievements of the sustainable development goals, so we have the status analysis as well as the trend analysis, progress analysis. So this part is provide us a brief simple kind of discussion related to the progress assessment or the trend assessment at the indicator level. That is, so we have to choose an indicator, so whether that indicator is progressing or not, or whether it is stagnant. So that to answer for that, we need to calculate a trend for that. So the trend, of course, is calculated from baseline to the target. So whether the country is following that trend or not, so whether it is on the trend or off the trend, deviated from the trend, probably we have seen these discussions related to the progression or the progress assessment of the SDGs related works. So now let us have a methodological aspect of how that trend assessment is done at the indicator level for numerical target related indicators. As earlier I have said, a simple method of assessing the trend of the numerical indicators, not just in SDGs, in most of business economics related variables. I hope all of us knew that the most popular methodology, most popular tool or the technique for the trend analysis is the, say, that is the compound annual growth rate or the trend analysis in general. Okay, so based on that, the UN reports also make uses the same method which has generally followed by the researchers for computation of compound annual growth rate here. So therefore, here we have two such compound annual growth rates. The one is the compound annual growth rate, which is represent the actual value, that is from the baseline to the current period, and the other one is calculated with baseline with the target period. So therefore, here we have two compound annual growth rates. The one is CAGR-A and the other one is CAGR-R. The CAGR-A represent the actual compound growth rate of a indicator we have chosen, and also we need to calculate the CAGR of monitoring end of the monitoring period, then we should have to compare these two, and also we need to take the ratios of these two. So based on comparing these two and the distance between these two, okay, and taking the ratios, okay, taking the ratios. So we assess the trend analysis. So for that, as earlier I have told you that the geometric growth rate over the time period is assumed to calculate this CAGR, because the CAGR can also be calculated for the linear type of functions, geometric type of functions, and also S form, U form, and so on. But the most appropriate, even in other works which has been used in practice, is a geometric trend function, a geometric compound annual growth rate, that has also been used in this case. And these are the two formulas given for us here, okay, to estimate CAGR of actual and the CAGR of the end period. And I hope many of us, we are very familiar with this calculation of the compound annual growth rate, and there of course we have our own variable, but here we have the indicator, numerical indicator related to a particular target. And as earlier I have told you that, so here for setting an absolute baseline, if there is a baseline is here, the first one is used. This is for required growth rate. So that means to compare whether the actual growth of the compound annual growth rate so is meeting the required growth rate or not, because to reach that particular target in 2030, there's the country has to follow a particular path related to that indicator, and that gives a given by a CAGRR. Then CAGRA, that is the actual CAGR, gives you the actual path of the progress of that particular one. So if these two are one and the same, so then the target, that is the indicator, is on the path, indicator is on the track. So if is there any deviations of the actual growth compared to the required growth rate, so then there is a deviations or differences exists between the actual growth and the required growth rate, and this is the way they are compared, both in terms of course, the numerical value, and also that can be represented with a line graph. Probably you might have seen the methodology part of that UN reports related to these methodological aspects. So this is a mathematical way of representing and calculation of that, and the same can be represented with a diagrammatical representation. There we can visually observe whether the actual growth rate or in par with the required growth rate. So these are the things which we need to know about analyzing or assessing, so the trend or the progress of the GD indicators related to a numerical part. So then the one more method that also proposed by the report, that is called as compound ratio. This compound ratio is nothing but the ratio of the earlier two things. That is a ratio to CAGRA to CAGR. So so based on this, the normative direction can be assessed. Whereas the earlier one, that is for numerical values. So if we need also some normative analysis, like whether it is progressive or regressive, deteriorating or stagnant. So for these kinds of indicators normative analysis, so this CR, that is the compound ratio, has been used in the report. So based on that trend or the progress analysis, so this is the assessment category proposed by the UN, and its symbols used for that. Say for example, like this. Compound, that is based on the compound ratio. So for a decreasing direction, for an increasing direction, if your actual, that is the CR value, that is the compound value, is less than or equal to that the yardstick value. So then for a decreasing function, it is called target is already met. So if it is greater than, for an increasing direction, then the target is already met. That's why you should have to be very careful. This increasing or equal or decrease, less than or equal or greater than or equal signs for this decreasing and increasing related directions. Okay. And if the CR, compound ratio, is greater than or equal to 0.95, so that is assessed as on track to achieve the target. And here there are two, say, aroma, that is the arrow marks, or that greater than symbols are used for that on track to achieve the target. So if the value is between 0.10 to 0.95, it is known as on path, but the progress is too slow to achieve the target, represented by a symbol, single greater than symbol. So then if it is minus by an amount of 0.10 to 0.10, no improvement, stagnation. So since the baseline, from that baseline here, there is no improvement at all. So that's why that particular indicator is stagnant. But if it is less than a negative value of 1.10, that is minus 0.10, then it is move away from the target, or there is a deterioration. So that is actually that particular indicator is decreasing compared to the baseline. So that's why in all these, even in methodology and also in this assessment, say analysis. So what we have been observed here is that, so there is a baseline. So we need to compare the value with that baseline. And if the current value is less than the baseline, that is deterioration. If there is no change, no improvement. If there is some improvement, then that improvement is classified as on path, on track, or the target is already achieved. Okay. So that is for the trend analysis or the progress assessment for the indicators with have numerical targets. So here the indicators without numerical targets, so only CAGR of A is calculated, because there is no any say the target to achieve for this, because since they are numerical, the non-numerical one, so there are no yardstick for them to achieve. So that's why only current CAGR has been calculated and converted into a non-normative directions. So based on that normative direction of that particular indicator, so whether the target is reached, or whether that on path or stagnant or only too slow improvement, so that can be analyzed using this CAGR with the current value only. And this is the legend and interpretation, and with symbols and categories classified by UN report for this. So numerical, that is without numerical indicators trend analysis. So here same symbols are used, of course, with some modifications. Okay, mean very positive, and neutral, negative, and very negative. And these are all related to, say, for example, if it is very positive, means applies to all normative directions. Okay, so it's very positive, that is applied to all normative directions. But slightly improvement, which is positive indicating, applies only to indicator with a decreasing or increasing direction, because as already we have noted that the classifications of this normative analysis, decreasing, increasing, non-decreasing, non-increasing. So that's why, so we should have to be very careful in classification of these indicators, whether it is for status or whether it is for trend analysis. So for these non-numerical indicators on these classifications, and based on this, of course, the assessment has been done, and the general outcomes are used for interpretation of this non-numerical indicators for the trend analysis. So then the third part here is related to, there are some indicators which are expressed as scores. Earlier expressed as some numerical values, expressed as with some non-numerical normative forms, but there are some specific scores are there. Okay, so for that scores, the methodology is somehow different. So the indicators expressed as scores need a specific procedure for their trend assessment. This involves comparing the latest value with the baseline value of the score to assign the corresponding assessment category. That is, there are also categorization, but since the value is already in the score form, so then here we have a baseline value and the current status value, then directly they are compared, and based on that the assessment has been done. For example, the indicator like 14.6.1, that is the degree of implementation of international instruments aiming to combat illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, and one more 14.B1, degree of application of legal regularity policy or institutional framework which recognizes and protects access rights for small fisheries that have 5 as their maximum score value, and the assessment category would be as shown in the following table. That means, so here the score already is specified in the indicator. So that's why based on the given score, so the comparison is easy with the current value with the score stipulated already in the methodology. So this is. So like the rule is, so the baseline value is between 1 to 5, and the latest value, if it is 5, then the target is already met. Okay, so this is the for the to decide whether the target is met or not related to the score related indicator. So the range is from 1 to 5. So if the country has a value of 5 for that particular indicator, so then it is met. The target is already met. So if the latest value minus baseline value, if that the difference between those two is greater than 2, and the latest value is less than 5, if that is in between these two, which is showing an improvement, and the difference between the latest value and the baseline value, if it is equal to 1, and the latest value is less than 5, so then it is slight improvement. That's why in this case, the comparison is based on that range of value between 1 to 5 with the latest value of that particular indicator of the region or a country, so that the countries are assessed as targets are already met, improved or slight improvement, no improvement, or say movement away from the baseline target or the target. So this is for the indicators which are having scores. Then of course, what thus far we have been discussed was related to the current status of indicators, then the trends of indicators classified as having numerical yardstick and not having numerical yardstick, and so on, related to the assessment at indicator level. For example, as earlier I have told you that 300 indicators or 208 indicators for every indicator. So for say current level or the status and the trend, we have to follow the earlier methodology. Thus far we were discussed whether they have represented as scores, whether they are represented as the normative form, or whether they are represented with the numerical yardsticks. But now, because by summarizing, by combining those indicators, we have targets. So then the assessment of the progress of the targets is the discussion for this part. Then how targets are assessed, how the progress of the target is assessed. So, and also at the goal level, because we have 17 goals. The methodology which has been given in this slide and in the following slides gives the methodology to assess the progress of not only 169 targets, and also the same methodology has been used to assess the progress or the achievements of the goals level also. For example, the UN report specified the following methodology to assess the SDGs targets. So in the first case, as already we have noted that, so as we were already discussed, that is the current status and the trends at the indicator level that has been used here also. And along with that, these two measures of progress are inserted into a scoring function that linearly normalizes the values of the current status and the trend on a continuous scale from 0 to 4. So that's why for the trend analysis earlier we have followed, for the indicator level, the same methodology are used here, and they are inserted into, because already we have scores, already we have some that is the quintile values, already we have some numerical values for the numerical indicators. Okay, they are all used and inserted into a scoring function, so which normalizes linearly both the current status and the trends at the target and the goal level into a continuous scale from 0 to 4. And in the third step, these normalized scores are usually used directly to assess the targets that are monitored by only one indicator. And this is for the targets with multiple indicators. The current status and the trends normalized scores are obtained by averaging indicator level normalized scores into target level, because there are only one or two indicators are there. So if there are multiple indicators, because all those multiple indicators have to be normalized score, converted into a normalized scores in trends, so then they are used at the target level. So like this, all that indicators which have been used and estimated and assessed, okay, now you have to use those values for the progress assessment of the targets and the goals by using this methodology. And this is the formula. Again, here the classification of the progress assessment of the targets further subdivided, as already we have noted, into indicators with numerical target, and this is the score distance formula. It is a score distance formula. So this score distance formula has been used to calculate the score between 0 to 4, as already we have noted that. Okay, and this is the table which represent, as already I have told you, that based on that distance score. So the targets are current status of the targets are analyzed. Like as earlier I have told you that the score, if it is 4, target is already met. If it is between 3 to 4, close to the target. If it is moderate distance from that particular target, so the value lies between 2 to 3, but the distance value is different, but that is converted into scores, as already I have told you, between 0 to 1. If the value is less than 1 up to, or between 0 to 2, as already we have noted that it is very far away from to reach the target. So this is related to the numerical indicators assessed the progress for the targets itself. And it is for without numerical target. So the scores are calculated by using these mathematical formulas. And again, as earlier we have noted that the quintiles are here also used, and the values of that quintiles are converted into scores. Again, for this non-numerical indicators for the targets assessment is also between 0 to 4 and 4, and based on that the assessment is also done as earlier. Okay, then that is the progress and the trend. So here also in case of trend, the same, of course, earlier we have used that is the score assessment, CR score assessment, but here it is compound ratio. Since it is related to the trend, since it is related to the trend, the compound ratio has been used both for so the indicator level, that is numerical target indicators, without numerical target indicators, and these are the classifications. Okay, and this is the indicators which have been expressed as scores. But as of course, just what you should have to observe from all these, the target level progress assessment, in all these cases, the report assigned the values are from 0 to 4, whether it is a numerical indicator related target, or an indicator without numerical indicator, or having a score. Say in all these cases, finally the scores are obtained from that distance formula, and it is interpreted. So these are some few, of course, individual specific indicator level assessments. So I hope many of us knew that. So based on that, how a current level of an indicator is assessed, and a trend of an indicator is assessed. For example, it is related to the first target, first indicator, first SDG, first target, first indicator, that is proportion of population below the international poverty line. So these are the say the threshold applied by the methodology. That is the target met or almost met. So that is the distance to the target, and the assessment is based on the current level is if the population proportion in any country below the international poverty line is less than or equal to 3%. So if it is between 3 to 6%, close to the target. If the proportion of the population below that international poverty line between 6 to 15%, that is moderate distance to the target. So it is say above 15% but below 25%. So it is far from the target, and very far from if it is greater than 25%. 25%. That's why. So this is the assessment at the indicator level, which has a numerical one, and the trend is calculated like this. That is the compound ratio, as earlier I have told you that. So these are the values of the compound ratio which are used for to assess the trend. Okay, so like this. So here I have some more selected indicators related to the goal 1. The one more is proportion of population covered by social protection system. So then its trend. Then the another one is related to the food security related indicator. Okay, so like this, I had some examples related to an indicator level and their assessment at the current level, and as well as the trend. Okay, so for like this, we can have both the status of an indicator and the trend of an indicator, whether it is a numerical indicator or an indicator without numerical value. If, for example, in case of Indian context, 308 indicators are 208 proposed by UN. So then we will have these values for all those indicators. So therefore, to conclude on this, because another we have only 8 to 9 minutes. Okay, to conclude on this, so we as the teachers, as well as the researchers, along with the results given by the reports, to assess or to examine or to analyze the achievements, progress, status of the sustainable development goals or any other economic variable in any context, along with the results which are given by some reports or obtained by ourselves. We also must have to have some knowledge related to how those values are derived, how the values are arrived, because we cannot generally say without a methodology, a indicator is off track, a indicator is on the track, or a goal is not reached, a goal is that, or the country is very closer to that goal. And of course, these are the conclusions, these are the inferences which we have drawn just by seeing the reports are related to the SDG reports itself. Many of us are stating these conclusions or inferences. But having the knowledge related to that also, we must also have to have the knowledge of how that value is calculated, how that value is arrived. So what methodology was followed to arrive it. So without having this knowledge, of course, to my knowledge, so our knowledge related to the assessment, our knowledge related to the discussion on status of SDGs, or to discussion on anything other than even SDGs is not say 100% right or 100% correct. So with these words, so I thank all my dear friends for your patience listening from last 75 minutes. So thank you all. So if you have any questions or any additions to this, so